As dusk bled across the jagged peaks, the elite Viper team was being erased, pinned down by heavy armor, their cover dissolving under a relentless barrage of mortar fire. In a command center miles away, a general traced their demise on a cold, glowing screen, his words a death sentence. But on the far edge of the base, inside the forgotten Hangar 7, a rusted door groaned open. They thought she was buried under paperwork, a ghost in the machine. But tonight, the Warthog would remember her name. Before I show you exactly how she turned the tide, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The order came down like a guillotine. No air support. Command has gone dark on us. The words crackled through Master Chief Hex Corrigan's earpiece, each syllable a nail in their collective coffin. He slammed a fist into the dirt behind the shattered remains of an adobe farmhouse, the moon exposing the twisted rebar like a skeletal hand reaching from the rubble. His men, the best operators in the world, were now just cornered animals. 20 yards away, Specialist Rook O'Connell, barely old enough to be here, fumbled with a fresh magazine, his hands shaking. They're just leaving us, Hex? The question hung in the air, more devastating than the incoming shells. They were expendable, a calculated loss on a general's ledger. 2 miles away, inside the cavernous gloom of Hangar 7, Captain Evelyn Eve Ross heard the same silence. It screamed louder than any order. She stood before the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a relic condemned to rust. Its shark-mouth nose art was faded, the canopy filmed with a thick layer of desert dust. The tires were flat, making the 30,000-pound jet sag like a beast with broken legs. On paper, this was her domain, the boneyard. She was a glorified clerk, an asset manager for decommissioned hardware, a punishment detail for a pilot who once flew too close to the sun and saw things the brass wanted buried. A memory flashed, hot and bitter. General Thorne, in his pristine office, sliding a file across a polished desk. Your combat status is revoked, Captain. You're a liability. He hadn't met her eyes. She wasn't a person, just a problem to be filed away. Now, on a tablet in her hand, the tactical map glowed. A single cluster of red icons, labeled Viper, was blinking, about to be extinguished. Another team about to be sacrificed for the greater good. Another acceptable loss. Not again, she whispered, her voice tight with a cold fury she thought she had long since suppressed. The ghosts of other soldiers, other missions, rose in the hangar's dusty air. This time, the order wasn't just wrong, it was a betrayal. Her eyes locked onto the A-10. It wasn't just a machine, it was a promise. A promise of brutal, ugly, life-saving firepower. The decision wasn't made, it was ignited. She threw the tablet aside and hauled herself up the boarding ladder. Each metal rung a note of defiance. The cockpit smelled of stale, oil, and ozone. She strapped herself in, her movements fluid with a muscle memory that no desk job could erase. Her fingers flew across the cold, dark panel, a flurry of practiced motion. Power switch, APU, fuel pumps. The hangar silence was broken by a low hum. She hit the engine start switch. A whine, a cough, then nothing. A red fault light blinked accusingly. For a heart-stopping second, she thought the old beast was truly dead. Don't you do this to me, she gritted through her teeth. She cycled the power, re-ran the sequence. This time, when she hit the switch, the port engine caught with a shuddering groan, then roared into a deafening blast that shook the very foundations of the hangar. Dust and debris shot out from behind the jet. The second engine followed suit. The forgotten Warthog was awake, and it was hungry. The sound hit Viper team first, not a sound of physical force. It was a deep, guttural roar that tore through the night, a noise so violent it felt like the sky itself was being ripped in half. Everyman on both sides froze, heads tilting upwards. Out of the darkness, a demonic silhouette appeared, wide-winged and ugly. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon opened up. 7 barrels of 30mm depleted uranium began to spin. The resulting eruption of fire and sound was apocalyptic. The ground around the enemy armor detonated as if struck by a meteor shower. A BMP-3 that had been confidently advancing simply ceased to exist, its hull vaporized in a flash of white-hot light. Its turret launched into the air like a discarded toy. Infantry who had been setting up a mortar position were erased in a churning wave of earth and shrapnel. For Viper Team, it was a divine intervention. Rook O'Connell, who had been muttering a prayer, fell back against the wall, his mouth agape. Hex Corrigan watched the carnage and felt a single, hot tear trace a path through the grime on his cheek. It wasn't just relief. It was a violent, profound reclamation of hope from the jaws of absolute despair. "No way," he breathed. Back in the sterile confines of the command center, General Thorne watched a friendly icon, an unauthorized one, rip through his tactical map. His face went from pale shock to crimson rage. "Who the hell is that? Who authorized that launch?" he bellowed, slamming his fist on the holographic table. A terrified lieutenant stammered, "Sir, that's the decommissioned A-10 from Hangar 7. No pilot is assigned. It's not flight ready." "Then get them on the horn now," Thorne roared. Eve's headset crackled to life. "Unidentified aircraft, this is command. You are in direct violation of a no-fly order. State your intentions and disengage immediately, or you will be fired upon." Eve's response was a flick of a switch. She killed the link to command. The only voices that mattered now were on the ground. She toggled to the emergency guard channel, a frequency reserved for units in dire straits. Her voice was calm, steady, and utterly foreign in their hopeless night. "Viper Team, this is Warthog. I'm on station. Pop smoke on your position. I'll cover you." A stunned silence followed. Then Hex, his voice cracking, responded. "Warthog, solid copy. Popping white smoke on the north wall." A canister hissed, and a plume of white smoke billowed into the night sky. For General Thorne, watching on his screen, this was the ultimate act of insubordination. The pilot wasn't just disobeying. She was coordinating with the very unit he had written off. She was choosing them over him, over the chain of command, over her entire career. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Give me a full bio on every pilot on this base with A-10 experience. I want a name. And when she lands, I want her in irons." But Eve wasn't thinking about landing. She banked the Warthog, the shark mouth seeming to grin as she lined up her next run. She had drawn a line in the sand. On one side was duty, on the other was her career. She had made her choice. The enemy, initially routed by the sheer shock of the A-10's arrival, began to adapt. Their panic hardened into calculated fury. From behind a ridge, the angular four-barreled turret of a ZSU 23-4 Shilka self-propelled anti-aircraft gun rolled into view, its radar dish beginning to sweep the sky. Then another appeared beside it. "Warthog, be advised, they've got Shilkas on the ridge," Hex transmitted, his voice tight with renewed tension. "They're painting you." "Solid copy, Viper," Eve replied, her tone betraying nothing. But inside the cockpit, her HUD lit up with threat warnings. The Shilkas were fast, lethal, and notorious for shredding low-flying aircraft. This was no longer a turkey shoot. It was a duel. Down in the farmhouse ruins, Rook watched the dark shape of the jet wheeling against the stars. "Hex, who is that?" he asked, his voice full of awe. Hex stared into the darkness, a forgotten rumor surfacing in his mind. "Years ago," he began, his voice low, "there was a pilot, an ace. Flew the Hog like she was born in it. Pulled a team out of a situation 10 times worse than this. They said she disobeyed a direct order to save them. The brass buried it, erased the mission, struck her name from the commendations. They called her Ghost. I thought it was just a story." As if on cue, the Ghost dove straight at the ridge. The Shilkas opened up, spitting a dense wall of 23mm cannon fire into the air. Tracers of red and green stitched a deadly web across the sky. Eve weaved the Warthog through it, making the heavy airframe dance with a grace that defied physics. The GAU-8 roared, a short, disciplined burst that tore the first Shilka apart. But as she pulled up, the second one locked on. A stream of high-explosive shells walked across her right wing. The jet shuddered violently. Alarms blared through the cockpit. A red light flashed. RHHYD press low. The stick suddenly felt like it was set in concrete. She had to use all her strength to keep the wing from dipping into a fatal dive. The jet was wounded. "Warthog, you're hit. Disengage," Hex yelled into the comms. But he didn't pull back. Gritting her teeth, she looped the crippled jet around, fighting the controls with every fiber of her being. She came in lower this time, using a small hill as cover until the last possible second. She popped up, the second Shilka filling her sights. Before its crew could react, she squeezed the trigger. The Avenger spoke one last definitive time. The anti-aircraft gun erupted in a ball of fire. Silence returned to the valley, broken only by the strained whine of Eve's damaged engine. She had won the duel, but the cost was mounting. The jet was bleeding hydraulic fluid, leaving a faint, dark trail in the night sky. She was losing control bit by bit. The general had tried to erase her. The enemy had tried to kill her. And now, her own aircraft was threatening to betray her. The fight for Viper Team was won. The fight for her own survival had just begun. Fuel state, critical. Ammo, Winchester. I'm a flying brick. Eve's assessment to herself was grim. The control stick fought her, the right wing threatening to dip and send her into a death spiral. She had bought Viper Team their miracle, but now she was out of time, out of options, flying on fumes and sheer willpower. She had to land, and the main base was an impossible distance away. But there was one other chance. A ghost on the map, an unlisted forward arming and refueling point, a FARP, that officially didn't exist. It was an old crop duster strip run by a crew of maintenance rejects and misfits, the kind of place command preferred to forget. She keyed a long-forgotten frequency. Any station. This is Ghost Rider on an old friend's channel. I'm falling out of the sky and need a hot pit stat. Static hissed. Then a gruff, female voice cut through. Took you long enough, Ghost. Heard you were raising hell. This is Master Sergeant Petrova. The strip's shit, but the gas is good. Bring it in. We'll leave the lights on for you. Relief washed over Eve, potent and sharp. Grease Petrova, a legend in the maintenance world. If anyone could put this bird back together with duct tape and fury, it was her. The strip was barely visible, a ragged line of asphalt in a field of withered sunflowers, illuminated by the angled headlights of a dozen trucks. Petrova and her crew, looking more like a biker gang than a military unit, guided her in with glowing marshalling wands. Eve dropped the landing gear. The left and nose gear locked with a reassuring clunk. The right one stayed up, damaged. It was going to be a controlled crash. She flared, cutting power, and let the jet settle, holding the right wing up for as long as possible before it slammed onto the runway with a horrific shriek of tearing metal. Sparks flew in a 20-foot plume as she fought to keep the jet straight. It finally skidded to a stop just yards from Petrova. The crew swarmed the Warthog before the engines had even fully spooled down. "Hot pit! Go, go, go!" Petrova yelled. Fuel hoses snaked out, ammo belts were slammed into the Avenger's drum, and two mechanics physically hammered a bent control surface back into a semblance of straightness. Just as they finished, the rumble of an approaching vehicle cut through the night. A military police Humvee screeched to a halt, blocking the runway. "Stand down. By order of General Thorne, that aircraft is grounded," an MP shouted through a megaphone. Petrova didn't even look at him. She looked up at Eve in the cockpit, gave her a sharp nod, then turned and stood directly in front of the Humvee, arms crossed. Her entire crew formed a line with her. A human wall. "She's not done," Petrova said, her voice carrying easily in the tense silence. That was all Eve needed. She pushed the throttles to the firewall. The Warthog screamed, lumbering forward. The MPs stood their ground for a second, then dove out of the way as the 30,000-pound jet bore down on them. Eve yanked back on the stick. The crippled jet fought for altitude, the damaged wing dipping dangerously. For a second, it looked like she wouldn't make it. Then, with a final, shuddering lurch, she was airborne again. As she turned back toward the valley, a new, chilling tone filled her headset. It wasn't a Shilka. It was the cold, steady lock of a radar-guided SA-15 Gauntlet missile system. The enemy had brought out their ace, and it had just painted a target on her back. Eve Ross's story reminds us that within the cold calculus of command, there is a force that can't be quantified or erased, the human heart. Sometimes breaking the rules isn't an act of rebellion, but the ultimate act of loyalty, not to the orders, but to the people they affect. Her flight proved that true honor is not found in blind obedience, but in choosing to become hope when all hope is gone. Have you ever felt like you had to break a rule to do the right thing? What would you have done if you were in General Thorne's position, weighing the rules against the lives of your soldiers? And do you think true heroes are born from following orders, or from knowing when to defy them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all. If this story of a lone warrior defying the odds resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about impossible courage. Share this with someone who believes that one person can still make a difference. We read and respect every single comment. More stories about heroes forged in fire are waiting on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another tale that will leave you breathless.